Ready for a rally. President Donald Trump is set to resume his campaign events, while he's already drawing criticism. Reaching out. U.S. senators are being asked to help Catholic schools. We're on Capitol Hill. Lives of the Saints. A closer look at the Vatican's canonization process. And trip to Germany. An update on Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI during his visit to his brother. On EWTN News Nightly for Friday, June 19th, 2020. Good evening and thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Tracy Sable. Today is Juneteenth, which is a portmanteau or blend of the words June and 19th. On this day in 1865, Union Army General Gordon Granger arrived in Galveston, Texas, and told slaves that the Civil War was over and that they were free.
They started celebrating, and their descendants moved that celebration out of Galveston, Texas, to around Texas, around the United States, and now around the world.
Juneteenth has been a state holiday in Texas for decades and should not be confused with Emancipation Day on April 16th. That is the day when President Lincoln freed slaves in Washington, D.C. Slavery officially ended in the U.S. on December 6, 1865, with a ratification of the 13th Amendment. But now, with the conversation around racial equality, lawmakers on Capitol Hill are considering making Juneteenth a national holiday. President Donald Trump issues a warning to anyone thinking about causing trouble at his campaign rally tomorrow in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And while some have criticized his plans to hold the rally during the pandemic, the president is not backing down. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen?
Tracy, here at the White House, Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany held a news conference this afternoon. On Tulsa, she said the White House is all on board, ready to go. And on DACA, she said the president was right on the law.
Even after the High Court's decision, President Donald Trump isn't done with DACA. But I asked the White House press secretary this afternoon if the president would consider the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops' written request to the White House to reconsider terminating DACA.
Well, the president said to me, I'm going to take care of DACA far better than the Democrats ever did. Democrats had 2.5 years to make a deal on DACA. They didn't do it. He wants to take care of these individuals, but it needs to be done in a lawful way.
Meanwhile, the Tulsa rally.
And we're going to be in Oklahoma, and it's a crowd like I guess nobody's seen before.
On behalf of Oklahoma, we're so excited to have you. And like you said, I don't know if people caught that, but over 1 million people have requested tickets to come to this event.
The president admonishing potential troublemakers, tweeting, "You will not be treated like you have been in New York, Seattle, or Minneapolis. It will be a much different scene." But with the ubiquitous virus,
our healthcare professionals are saying that this is not a good time to have it. We've had our highest spikes ever.
The potential for the virus to take off there is very, very nerve-wracking and could have catastrophic consequences.
Ahead of the visit,
for sure opening up was the right choice.
News that employers added jobs in 46 states last month.
The option of keeping the economy shut was just not on the table. It was not possible because I don't think that the U.S. economy could recover from being shut for 3, 4, 5, 6 months.
And coming soon, the John Bolton book.
The excerpts that I've seen have been factually false.
The president and his former national security advisor apparently just didn't see eye to eye.
But by the end of his tenure with the administration, it was obvious that John Bolton and the president were dramatically misaligned.
Finally, in Tulsa, the president tweeted today there will be no curfew after all, and he told rally-goers to enjoy themselves. Tracy?
White House correspondent Owen Jensen reporting for us tonight. Thanks so much, Owen. Susan Crabtree, White House and national political correspondent for Real Clear Politics, joins me now by Skype to talk more about tomorrow's rally. Susan, welcome back to the show. Good to see you.
Great to see you too, Tracy.
So this will be President Trump's first rally in more than 3 months, and some supporters have driven hundreds of miles just to be there. What are you looking to see from the president tomorrow?
Well, it's clear that President Trump is looking for a radical reset of his campaign. He's had to reconfigure the whole apparatus and strategy. And right now, I wrote about yesterday, This campaign rally not only lets him energize his base and his supporters out in Oklahoma and around the country who are flying in for the event, it also lets him get in touch with voters directly outside with his campaign staff, where they collect data and they actually help register voters, which has completely been ground to a halt during the COVID crisis. The voter registration drives that we heard so much about last year were really completely upended with the COVID problem. And now he really needs these rallies to get back in touch directly with voters.
Susan, what do you make of the timing of this rally and its possible boost for his campaign?
Well, as you know, it's a difficult time for him. Nobody wants to see the numbers that he's seeing at this point in the campaign. The Real Clear Politics average of polls has him down against Biden 8.8 percentage points. If you look back at the same time in June of 2016, Hillary Clinton was up 1.5 over Trump, allowing Trump sort of overtake her. There was not this big wide margin. As you know, the Trump campaign really doesn't take these polls. They said that they're can be wildly off base. So it's really about mobilizing his voters. So that's critical right now. You'll see Donald Trump, as we've seen him before at these rallies, ever the showman, reality star, ringleader, leading these raucous crowds. So he's going to be back on very familiar turf for him and very comfortable turf.
Well, Susan, you mentioned Joe Biden. Earlier this week, he announced that his campaign raised $81 million in May, making it his strongest fundraising haul ever. How do you think his campaign is doing overall?
Well, I think, it's since May, he had a 5 percentage point advantage in May. He seems to be taking more of a quieter approach, letting Donald Trump be out front, handling all of these multiple crises. He did put out his own plans, but he has been trying to get out of the basement, so to speak, of his Delaware home and get back in touch with voters. He's had some trouble doing that, but he's he's not engaging like Donald Trump is engaging with these tweets, and there's a lot of controversy involved with the racial unrest going on in the country that has really, we've seen Donald Trump's numbers really plummet in recent weeks since the Memorial Day problems with George Floyd's death and the protests across the country, and his handling of those protests has been a problem for Donald Trump. So Biden is benefiting by taking more a steadier, sort of quieter approach, it seems. And the truth, of course, will be in how each can mobilize their voters to either turn out, mail in their ballots, because mail-in voting, as you know, will be greatly expanded come November, or actually turn out in the polls. You have to prepare for both, because voter behavior during this pandemic is very unpredictable. So it's an unprecedented campaign in the middle of dual crisis with the racial unrest and both ongoing COVID problems. And we'll see how both sides can mobilize their voters. But the story I did the other day was that the voter registration drives that they were so saying were so important, especially in states like Florida, have really not produced what they wanted to, because they were unable to register those voters in great numbers in person with the COVID crisis.
Well, Susan, thanks so much. We always appreciate your insight. Susan Crabtree, White House and national political correspondent for Real Clear Politics. Thanks again, Susan.
Absolutely, Tracy.
The Tennessee Senate has passed a pro-life bill. The measure bans abortion once a baby's heartbeat is detected. The Tennessean newspaper reports it also bans abortion due to a diagnosis of Down syndrome. Republican Governor Bill Lee is expected to sign the measure. Public and private schools across the world were shut down to protect against spreading the coronavirus. But now many Catholic schools are facing financial challenges to reopen, and they see no help in the latest aid bill passed by the House. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales reports. Eric?
That's correct, Tracy. Here's the deal. Catholic school administrators tell EWTN that money in the first COVID aid bill, known as the CARES Act, actually helped them stay afloat. But that's not the case with the HEROES Act, which passed the House about 5 weeks ago. In the HEROES Act, no money goes to non-public schools, including Catholic schools. So now the rush is on to get that changed.
I would like to include more education money and do it like we did it in the CARES Act in March, to include non-public institutions.
The CARES Act gave $13.2 billion to K-12 schools and mandated a proportional share of those funds to go to non-public schools. The House's $3 trillion HEROES Act has $90 billion in educational funds, but no money for non-public schools. I asked the House Speaker about that decision.
What we did was expand the number of people that can be employed by a nonprofit so that they can participate in a PPP.
Democratic Senator Tim Kaine also points to the PPP, or Paycheck Protection Program.
I got a letter from both of my Virginia bishops because both there was education funding, but also PPP funding has pretty heavily been used by churches in Virginia and elsewhere.
Virginia's bishops warn their senators, quote, without immediate aid, we may be forced to make difficult decisions that could overwhelm the public school system in our Commonwealth. Catholic School Superintendent Kathleen Porter McGee tells me the COVID-19 shutdowns have created a dire situation.
I think it's going to be felt most intensely by the Catholic schools that serve our nation's most disadvantaged communities.
She's aware some senators aren't eager to spend more.
Anybody at this point that's needing more probably ought to have a plan B as well and find how you can do that locally or through your state.
And she's considering all options.
If we don't find a way to get creative and to make sure that this pandemic doesn't accelerate the closure of hundreds of Catholic schools, I think we're going to be facing challenges that we're only now starting to understand.
Virginia bishops did write letters to senators urging them to change the bill, and they said that the next coronavirus aid bill must provide relief to prevent the closures of Catholic schools and other non-public schools. As we know, Democrats are pushing Republicans to get it on the Senate floor, this bill, before the July 4th recess. Tracy?
Okay, thank you, Eric. Correspondent Eric Rosales reporting from Capitol Hill tonight. Nuns in Italy protest for financial aid for Catholic schools in front of Parliament. They chanted slogans in Rome demanding assistance for families who face financial difficulties due to the shutdowns during the coronavirus pandemic. The nuns run Catholic private schools across Italy. They are asking lawmakers to pass laws to let parents choose between private and public schools. India's prime minister is holding meetings with top opposition leaders as the government tries to lower tensions with China. They're asking if intelligence failures allowed China to build up forces along this disputed border. Anti-Chinese sentiment continues to grow in India due to the coronavirus pandemic. Chinese Communist authorities in Beijing are moving closer to approving the new national security law for Hong Kong. But the former leader of Hong Kong's Democratic Party says it's really a pretext to get complete control of the former British colony.
And instead of giving Hong Kong a high degree of autonomy, the central government now claims to have comprehensive jurisdiction over Hong Kong. That means they're claiming to have total power of control over Hong Kong, which is 180 degrees opposite to what Deng Xiaoping promised.
Li was involved in the early stages of drafting the so-called Basic Law, which is like Hong Kong's constitution. That's until the Chinese Communist Party removed him from the process. Israel is moving forward with plans to exert sovereignty over parts of the West Bank, but the foreign minister of Jordan is warning against it. He met with Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas yesterday and says if Israel goes ahead with annexing 30% of the West Bank, it will kill any hopes of a two-state solution. There is one office at the Vatican that considers every cause for sainthood. Pope St. Paul VI began the modern Congregation for the Causes of Saints in 1969. Each year, the department prepares all of the paperwork necessary for the Pope to consider canonization causes. Joining us now from Rome is Monsignor Robert Sarno. He worked for the Congregation for the Causes of Saints for almost 40 years, and now he works with the Pope Leo the Great Chair of Canon Law in Causes of Canonizations at St. John's Seminary of the Archdiocese of Los Angeles. Monsignor, welcome to the show. Great to have you.
Thanks. It's nice to be here.
So, Monsignor, how many applications does the Vatican receive each year for canonizations?
Well, it's not really a question of applications. It's the number of processes that come in from all over the world. And I would say generally processes on martyrdom, virtues, the offering of life and miracles probably number in the area of about 50 or 60 a year presented to the congregation for its study and judgment.
And how many canonization causes are open in the world right now?
Well, that's almost impossible to say because each cause is different and it's at a different stage. But the last time that I dealt with this information, I'd say that's probably the congregation has about over 3,000 open cases.
Can you talk about, I'm curious about your favorite part of working there?
Well, at the congregation, my expertise, apart from the English language, was the local process done for the gathering of evidence and proofs for and against the canonization. So I basically was involved in working at the local level to get the process done properly, to be of service to people who needed help and instructions. That's basically what I did my doctoral dissertation, and so that became my kind of expertise for the congregation.
Monsignor, I know a lot of us have sort of an affinity to certain saints. I'm curious, do you have a favorite saint?
Oh, gosh, that's kind of hard to answer because, you know, you forget one, you name one, you leave one out. I would say that over these years, the cause that I really enjoyed working on was the cause of Mother Teresa of Calcutta. I was deeply involved in that cause from beginning to end. And the great grace was the fact that I also knew her. I had met her in life and had worked with her. And so it was a real honor and a privilege to be able to work on that cause. I would probably say that Mother Teresa is one of my favorite saints, if you will.
Do you have a favorite memory about her or something that you wish to share with our audience?
Well, the first time I met her, she had come to the congregation because she wanted to ask the Holy Father, Pope John Paul II, to beatify Damien de Voister, the priest who worked on the island of Molokai in the Hawaiian Islands with the victims of leprosy. And so Mother came to the congregation, and since I was of English language, they asked me to work with her in preparing this letter for Pope John Paul II. What was amazing about her was that I remember her so distinctly, not pounding, but tapping the desk very hard, saying, you know, this is what I want to say to the Pope. This is what I want him to know. Please say this. And when I tried to rearrange words or make them a little bit more, I don't want to use the word diplomatic, but a little bit more soft, she said, no, 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 I want to say it right out to him. I want to tell him what I want, when I want it, the way I want it. I can remember that strength of faith and voice and confidence in herself that really impressed me.
Oh, that is wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. What a great memory. And thank you so much for being on as well. We appreciate it. Monsignor Robert Sarno, Chair of Canon Law and Causes of Canonization at St. John's Seminary of the Archdiocese of Los Angeles. Thank you again.
You're welcome.
Coming up, Hispanic Americans are affected by COVID-19 more than other ethnic groups. How Catholic organizations are helping. Researchers in Italy have found COVID-19 was in wastewater in northern cities in December, 2 months before the virus was confirmed. Meanwhile, in Spain, the death toll is being raised by more than 1,000 today. More than 28,000 people have now died from COVID-19 in Spain, but officials think another 12 or 13,000 may have also died from the virus. The spread is slowing, and Spain is lifting a state of emergency on Sunday. This week, data from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention shows Hispanic and Latino Americans are being affected by the coronavirus at a disproportionately high rate. While some immigrant families struggle with job loss and health care costs, they are now turning to the Catholic Church for aid. Correspondent Mark Irons reports. Mark?
Tracy, one immigrant I spoke with is relying on a Catholic Charities clinic to provide care for his family. Many immigrants are in jobs deemed essential, increasing their risk of being exposed to the virus. But not working brings the risk of losing a paycheck for your family.
We have become so accustomed to focus our lives on working and working and working.
Armando Reyes is a construction worker. He returned to his job this week after being away since March. Now recovered, he and his wife, along with 2 of their 5 children, had tested positive for COVID-19. Reyes and his wife are uninsured.
We don't have access to any healthcare system.
Alfonso Aguilar, president of the Latino Partnership for Conservative Principles, says Reyes' story isn't unique among immigrant communities. The pandemic is shedding light on some of their struggles.
Many don't have access to health insurance, and some are losing access to health insurance because they're losing their jobs.
Data this week from the CDC shows while Hispanics and Latinos account for 18% of the U.S. population, they make up 33% of confirmed COVID-19 cases.
They've lost jobs at a higher rate than average Americans.
Reyes experienced the financial concerns without work, compounded by the fact that he has no health insurance. But his family has received assistance.
The Catholic Church, in my case, has been so generous.
The Reyes family was able to rely on a Catholic Charities facility offering health care in Virginia. The clinic tells me the church continues to show the love of Christ through ministries such as Catholic Charities and the Mother of Mercy Free Medical Clinic, which serves the poor and vulnerable, including immigrants and refugees. Aguilar says low-income immigrants, regardless of status, do have some limited options if they're in need.
Go to an emergency room, you will be treated. There are community clinics that provide services without asking legal status.
The survey from the CDC this week found that minority groups, including Hispanics, African, and Native Americans, make up the majority of coronavirus infections. Among the most common underlying health conditions found were cardiovascular diseases, diabetes, and chronic lung disease. Tracy?
Correspondent Mark Irons reporting for us tonight. Thank you so much, Mark. Police in New York are charging 2 teens with vandalizing St. Patrick's Cathedral during the riots over George Floyd's death. 18-year-old Anya Diaz and another 17-year-old girl are facing criminal mischief charges for spray painting graffiti on the cathedral. It is located on 5th Avenue in Manhattan, near luxury department stores that were targeted during clashes with police last month. Pope Francis names a new bishop of Duluth, Minnesota. Father Michael Malloy is currently the administrator of the diocese in Rapid City. The 66-year-old is from South Dakota. When he takes over in Duluth, he will oversee 10 counties in northeastern Minnesota with 45,000 Catholics. His installation is set for the 1st of October. Up next, the Emeritus Pope celebrates Mass with his brother in Germany. Today we celebrate the solemnity of the most sacred heart of Jesus. The devotion to the heart of Jesus has been Christ's unconditional love at its center. Joining me now on Skype to talk more about today's significance is Father Thomas Petrie, moral theologian and professor at the Dominican House of Studies in Washington, D.C. He is also co-host of the Church Alive Saturday mornings on EWTN Radio. Father, welcome back. So good to see you again.
It's good to be here again with you, Tracy. I hope you're doing well.
I am. I hope you're doing well, too. Can you tell us a little bit about the origins of this feast and why do we focus on Jesus's heart?
The focus on Jesus's heart is actually very old in Christianity. You can find the church fathers, people like St. Jerome and St. Augustine, writing on the Lord's human heart as a sort of vessel, if you will, of his divine love. His divine love channeled through his humanity, his divine love for all of mankind. But this devotion sort of began through the preaching of St. Bernard of Clairvaux in the 11th century, but took off because of the visions of a nun in France, St. Margaret Mary Alacoque, who actually had mystical visions of Christ making promises to those who were devoted to his sacred heart, his love for all of humanity, and asking that this feast, the feast we celebrate today, be celebrated in the Church's liturgical year.
Father, what should we as Catholics keep in mind as we observe this holy day? And also, how can we draw strength from Jesus' love for humanity amidst all the challenges going on right now?
In the 17th century, the devotion arose through not only St. Margaret Mary Alacoque's visions, but also through the preaching of St. John Eudes, which is still relevant today. St. John Eudes was preaching against a heresy called Jansenism, which suggested that God's love was very narrow, very defined to just a small few. But the Sacred Heart reminds us that we are all the beloved children of God and that Christ came to redeem all of humanity. And so even in these difficult days when we find ourselves often suffering from temptations, just the normal temptations of life, but even today, the temptations of despair or polarization or anger, the Sacred Heart reminds us that these sins too can be forgiven in Christ's love and redemption.
Well, we only have a couple of minutes left, but tomorrow we will celebrate the Feast of the Immaculate Heart of the Blessed Virgin Mary. And I know these two celebrations go hand in hand, and really they're needed now.
They are more than ever. The Immaculate Heart of Mary is a symbol of her maternal love for all of us. And so the Church celebrates the Sacred Heart and the Immaculate Heart at the same time. I'd like to remind everyone that in 2002, St. John Paul II declared that the Sacred Heart, this feast day, should also be a day when people should pray for the holiness, the sanctification of all the priests in the world. People think that priests have an easy time to holiness, but we're tempted too. Just like everybody else, we too need to be reminded at times of God's great love for all of us. So please pray for all of your priests.
Oh, Father, thank you so much, and we will definitely pray for all of you. We appreciate you coming on. Father Thomas Petrie, professor at the Dominican House of Studies in Washington, D.C., and also co-host of the Church Alive Saturday mornings on EWTN Radio. Thank you again.
Thank you, Tracy.
Pope Francis bestows the Grand Cross Award to U.S. Ambassador to the Holy See, Callista Gingrich. Ambassador Gingrich, wife of former U.S. House Speaker Newt Gingrich, received the title Dame Grand Cross of the Order of Pope Pius IX. It is the highest distinction that a layperson can get from the Vatican. Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI celebrates Mass while visiting his brother in Germany. Today is the first full day of his visit to Germany. The Pope Emeritus arrived yesterday and celebrated Mass on today's Feast of the Sacred Heart. His 96-year-old brother is not in good health. Benedict, who resigned in 2013, decided to visit his brother on short notice after consulting with Pope Francis. We thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. We are back on Monday with more news from a Catholic perspective. Good night and God bless.